What if the most powerful woman on earth, an empress who commanded armies and ruled a quarter of the world, spent her final year not in triumph, but in unbearable heartbreak? In the winter of 1899, Queen Victoria begins receiving a series of telegrams that will destroy everything she holds dear: children, grandchildren, even lifelong confidence. Each message brings a loss more cruel than the last. But hidden among these tragedies lies a secret so intimate it was sealed inside her coffin, an untold love and a final wish that defied an empire. This is the year the unshakable queen was finally broken. Close your eyes and let me transport you back to December 1899. You're standing in the marble halls of Windsor Castle, watching Queen Victoria as she receives her morning correspondence. At 80, she moves slowly but with purpose, her black silk dress rustling against the floor with each determined step. Her face, carved by 8 decades of joy and sorrow, still bears the commanding presence that has shaped an empire. But watch her hands as she opens the first telegram of what will become the most devastating year of her life. See how they tremble slightly? Not from age, but from the growing dread that each piece of correspondence might bring news to shatter her heart once more. The Boer War rages in South Africa, and every morning brings casualty reports that read like a mother's nightmare. Young British soldiers, some barely older than her own great-grandchildren, are dying in a distant land for causes that seem increasingly unclear. Feel the weight pressing down on Victoria's shoulders as she reads each name, each age, each grieving family's loss. These aren't just statistics to her. She has personally signed the commissions that sent these boys to war. Their deaths feel like personal failures, each telegram a small dagger twisting in her conscience. You can see it in her eyes, the guilt, the helplessness, the crushing responsibility of command that never leaves a sovereign's heart. Move with me now to January 1900 and witness the moment that will begin Victoria's year of unimaginable tragedy. A servant rushes into her private drawing room at Osborne House, his face pale with urgent news. The telegram in his hands bears news that makes Victoria's blood freeze. Her eldest son, the Prince of Wales, has narrowly escaped an assassination attempt in Belgium. Watch Victoria's reaction as she reads the details. A young anarchist fired at point-blank range, the bullet missed by mere inches. For a heart-stopping moment, Victoria imagines a world where she might have lost her heir, where the succession might have been thrown into chaos, where she might have buried another child. Her hands shake so violently that she can barely hold the telegram. She who has faced down prime ministers and foreign dignitaries now trembles like any frightened mother. But this is only the beginning of her torment. Spring arrives with news so cruel it seems designed by fate itself to break an old woman's heart. Her eldest daughter, Vicky, the brilliant, beautiful crown princess who married the future German emperor, writes from Kronberg Castle with devastating news: breast cancer, advanced, aggressive, painful. Picture Victoria reading Vicky's letter, written in handwriting that grows shakier with each line as pain interrupts her daughter's thoughts. Vicky describes the agony that racks her body, the treatments that bring no relief, the growing certainty that she will not recover. For Victoria, this isn't just losing a daughter. It's losing the child who most resembled Prince Albert in intellect and spirit. Vicky was supposed to be her legacy, the bridge between British and German royal houses. Now that bridge is crumbling along with her daughter's body. You can almost hear Victoria's sobs echoing through the corridors of Osborne House as she processes this news. Servants find her collapsed in Albert's old study, clutching Vicky's photograph and repeating his name like a prayer. The child she raised to be an empress is dying in agony thousands of miles away, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing, the most powerful woman in the world can do to save her. August brings a telegram that arrives like a physical blow. Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, her third son, her dear Affi, is dead. Throat cancer has claimed him at just 55 years old. Victoria's diary entry that night reads like a mother's soul spilling onto paper. "Oh God, my poor darling Affi gone too. My third grown-up child." Each word is blotted with tears that fall faster than she can write. Stand with Victoria in her private chapel as she mourns Alfred. This isn't just grief, it's guilt that tears at her like a physical wound. She watched him drink heavily for years, saw him smoke incessantly, but felt powerless to intervene. Royal protocols, family pride, and simple maternal helplessness combined to keep her silent. Now staring at his empty chair in the family dining room, she tortures herself with thoughts of what she might have done differently. The cruelest blow is yet to come. Picture a crisp autumn morning when another telegram arrives, this one announcing the death of Prince Christian Victor, Princess Helena's son, Victoria's cherished grandson. Just 33 years old, serving his country in South Africa, cut down by fever in the prime of his life. Victoria receives this news while walking in the gardens where she once played with Christian as a child, teaching him to identify birds and flowers. The telegram slips from her fingers and falls among the fallen leaves. For long minutes, she stands frozen, watching the wind scatter both the paper and the leaves while her mind struggles to process this latest loss. Christian was supposed to inherit the future, to carry forward the family traditions she has spent decades building. Instead, he lies buried in foreign soil, another casualty of an empire that demands everything from those who serve it. But fate hasn't finished with Victoria yet. In December, her dearest friend Lady Jane Churchill, a woman who has shared 60 years of confidences, celebrations and sorrows, dies suddenly while visiting Osborne House. Victoria herself discovers the body, entering Jane's guest room to share morning tea only to find her oldest companion cold and still in bed. Watch Victoria's face as she realizes what has happened. This isn't the formal grief of state mourning, or even the deep sorrow of losing family. This is the raw, primitive anguish of losing the last person on earth who remembers you as young, who knew you before the crown shaped you into someone else. Jane's death doesn't just take away a friend. It erases the final witness to Victoria's youth, her hopes, her dreams before duty consumed everything. Now observe how these accumulated tragedies begin to physically manifest in Victoria's body. Her appetite disappears entirely. Elaborate meals prepared by the royal kitchen staff sit untouched while she pushes food around golden plates with hands that shake increasingly with each passing day. Her weight drops dramatically, her already petite frame becoming almost skeletal beneath the black mourning dress that has been her uniform for 40 years. Her famous piercing blue eyes, once sharp enough to intimidate seasoned politicians with a single glance, now struggle to focus on the state papers that once commanded her complete attention. Watch her squinting at documents, holding them at arm's length, then closer, then setting them aside in frustration as the words blur together like meaningless marks on paper. Most heartbreaking of all, witness the moments when Victoria's brilliant mind begins to betray her. Sometimes she calls for Prince Albert, forgetting for blessed painful moments that he died 40 years ago. Other times she speaks to servants who retired decades before, or asks about children who are now middle-aged adults with children of their own. The woman who once memorized every detail of parliamentary procedure now struggles to remember what day it is. Yet through it all, Victoria maintains painful self-awareness of her decline. On New Year's Day 1901, sit beside her as she writes in her diary with handwriting that grows more laboured with each word. Another year begun. I am feeling so weak and unwell that I enter upon it sadly. These words, penned with a hand that once signed legislation affecting millions, read like a farewell letter to life itself. Enter Osborne House in early January 1901, and witness a family living in complete denial. Princess Helena and Princess Beatrice, Victoria's devoted daughters, maintain elaborate charades of normalcy. They order the same meals, schedule the same appointments, discuss future travel plans as if their mother might somehow recover and resume her duties. Their refusal to acknowledge reality isn't cruelty, it's the desperate fantasy of children who simply cannot imagine a world without their mother. But Dr. James Reed knows better. Watch him examining Victoria with the careful attention of a physician who has seen death approaching many times before. Her pulse grows weaker and more irregular each day. Her breathing becomes laboured, punctuated by long, frightening pauses. Her skin takes on the translucent quality that medical professionals recognise as a harbinger of the end. Reid tries desperately to prepare the family for what's coming, but they refuse to listen. How can they? Victoria has reigned for over 60 years, longer than most people live. She has been the only constant in a world of incredible change, the unmoving centre around which everything else revolves. The idea that she might simply die like any ordinary mortal seems impossible, even blasphemous. Consider the profound irony of this situation. Victoria ascended the throne when steam trains were experimental novelties and gas lamps lit the streets of London. Now, as the 20th century dawns, electric lights illuminate the capital, and automobiles begin appearing on city streets. She has witnessed humanity's transition from one age to another, serving as the bridge between worlds. The thought of that bridge suddenly collapsing leaves everyone paralyzed with disbelief. On January 17, 1901, reality crashes through their denial like a sledgehammer through glass. Victoria suffers the first of several severe strokes while sitting in her favourite armchair, reading correspondence from the Prime Minister. Watch as her face, always so animated and expressive, suddenly goes slack. Her words become slurred, then incomprehensible, then fade to silence. The papers slip from her fingers and scatter across the Persian carpet like fallen leaves. The transformation is immediate and terrifying. One moment she is Victoria Regina, Empress of India, ruler of the largest empire in human history. The next, she is simply a frail, elderly woman struggling to remember her own name. The family can no longer maintain their comforting lies in the face of such stark reality. Dr. Reed immediately sends urgent telegrams racing across Europe's telegraph networks. Kaiser Wilhelm II, Victoria's grandson, and the German Emperor, receives his message while attending a glittering state dinner in Berlin. Without hesitation, he cancels all celebrations, abandons his imperial duties, and rushes to England on the fastest ship available. Other family members reluctantly abandon their social engagements, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that they're travelling to say goodbye. Watch as the news reaches the British public through newspaper headlines that scream across front pages throughout the empire. Queen unconscious, sinking fast. But observe how even experienced journalists struggle with this unprecedented story. No reporter alive has ever covered the death of a British monarch. They fumble with protocols that don't exist, make wild speculations based on rumours, and publish contradictory reports that reflect their own confusion and denial. Some newspapers actually suggest Victoria is recovering when she's clearly dying. Others publish premature obituaries, then retract them in later editions. The entire machinery of public information grinds and stutters, unable to process the unthinkable reality that their eternal queen might actually be mortal. Now step into Victoria's bedroom during her final days and feel the weight of history pressing down on this small, surprisingly modest room. Unlike the grand state chambers where she conducted official business, this is an intimate space filled with family photographs, personal mementos, and the ever-present portrait of Prince Albert watching over everything with painted eyes that seem almost alive in the flickering candlelight. The smell of medicine mingles with the scent of flowers that well-wishers have sent from across the empire. Roses from England, jasmine from India, orange blossoms from Australia. These offerings create a garden of grief that fills every corner of the room with nature's tribute to a dying empress. Victoria lies in her narrow bed, propped up by silk pillows embroidered with the royal coat of arms. Her breathing is laboured, each inhalation a visible struggle that makes everyone present hold their own breath in sympathy. Her family surrounds the bed like a human fortress. Children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren creating layers of love and protection around their matriarch. The Bishop of Winchester stands at the foot of the bed, his voice occasionally breaking with emotion as he offers prayers that seem to rise toward heaven on wings of desperate hope. A local rector assists him, their combined voices creating a constant murmur of hymns and scripture that provides a sacred soundtrack to these final hours. Kaiser Wilhelm II, despite his complicated relationship with British politics and his reputation for arrogance, becomes simply a grieving grandson in this sacred space. For hours he refuses to leave Victoria's left side, holding her hand with a gentleness that surprises everyone present. This powerful emperor, accustomed to commanding armies and nations, now performs the humblest service imaginable, providing comfort to a dying grandmother. On her right side, Dr. Reed maintains his vigil with professional dedication and personal devotion. His fingers occasionally check her pulse with the practiced efficiency of someone who has performed this ritual thousands of times, but his eyes reveal the deep affection he feels for this remarkable woman he has served for decades. Despite her failing eyesight and increasing confusion, Victoria remains aware of her surroundings in ways that both comfort and break the hearts of those present. In a voice barely above a whisper, she tells Dr. Reed, "I am very ill." The simple honesty of this statement, delivered without self-pity or dramatic flourishes, captures the essential dignity that has defined her character throughout her reign. Reid, maintaining his bedside manner even in these final moments, responds with the kind lie that doctors have offered to dying patients throughout history. "Your Majesty has been very ill, but you are getting better now." Everyone in the room knows this is false, but the gentleness in his voice transforms the deception into an act of mercy. Victoria, clinging to hope with the tenacity that has sustained her through decades of personal and political challenges, asks with pathetic optimism, "Am I getting better? I would like to live a little longer as I have a few things to settle." The pathos in her voice, the mixture of hope and resignation, strength and vulnerability, reduces seasoned courtiers to tears. Watch as each family member approaches the bed for their final goodbye, understanding that these moments will haunt their memories for the rest of their lives. Sons and daughters, some now elderly themselves, lean down to kiss hands that once signed their birth certificates and guided their childhoods. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren whisper words of love and gratitude in multiple languages, representing the international family that Victoria's long reign has created. Some family members break down completely, their sobs echoing through the small room and spilling into corridors where servants stand ready to offer comfort and assistance. Others maintain their composure until they step outside, where staff members find them weeping against walls or collapsed in chairs, overwhelmed by emotions too powerful for public display. Outside Osborne House, crowds gather despite the bitter January cold, their breath creating clouds of vapor that rise toward grey skies, heavy with the promise of snow. These aren't just curious onlookers, they're subjects who have never known any other monarch. People whose entire sense of national identity is wrapped up in this one woman's continuing presence on the throne. Reporters camp at the gates with notebooks ready to capture every detail of this historic moment, but they struggle to find words adequate to the magnitude of what they're witnessing. Telegraph operators work around the clock, sending updates that race across oceans and continents to reach the far corners of an empire that spans the globe. Telephone calls flood Osborne House every few minutes. Newspaper editors demanding updates. Government officials seeking information. Foreign dignitaries expressing concern and support. The entire world seems to be holding its breath, waiting for news that everyone knows is coming but no one wants to hear. On January 22nd, 1901, at 6:30 in the evening, as winter darkness settles over the Isle of Wight, Queen Victoria draws her final breath. There's no dramatic final speech, no profound last words for history to remember, just a quiet exhalation that signals the end of an era and the beginning of an uncertain future. Dr. Reed gently closes her eyes with hands that have performed this final service for countless patients, but never for someone whose death will reshape the world. Kaiser Wilhelm II finally releases the hand he has held for hours, his own fingers cramped from maintaining that connection. Someone in the room begins to weep, whether from grief or relief or simple exhaustion, no one can say. The news spreads with a speed that would have seemed miraculous to earlier generations. Telegraph wires carry the announcement across the British Empire and around the world within hours. In London, the great bell of St. Paul's Cathedral begins its mournful toll, each note carrying across the Thames and throughout the city like a heartbeat that grows slower and sadder with each repetition. Church bells across the kingdom join this symphony of grief, creating a musical map of mourning that stretches from Scotland to Cornwall. People emerge from their homes wearing whatever black clothing they can find. Elegant mourning dress for the wealthy, simple black armbands for the poor, but all sharing the same expression of loss and uncertainty. Shop windows are draped in black cloth, transforming familiar streets into avenues of mourning. Flags fly at half-mast from every government building, creating a visual rhythm of grief against the grey January sky. An eerie quiet settles over normally bustling streets as people speak in whispers, as if afraid that normal conversation might somehow dishonour the dead Queen's memory. Many people cry openly in the streets, not just from personal grief, but from the terrifying realization that they're witnessing the end of the only world they've ever known. Victoria hasn't just been their queen, she's been the fixed star around which their entire universe has revolved. Without her, everything feels uncertain, unstable, potentially dangerous. But even in death, Victoria manages to create chaos that would be comical if it weren't so tragic. The royal family suddenly realizes they have no idea how to bury a monarch who has reigned for over 6 decades. The last state funeral occurred so long ago that all the protocols have been forgotten, buried in dusty archives that no living person has consulted. Government officials scramble through ancient precedent books, searching for guidance that simply doesn't exist. How do you bury someone who has been alive longer than anyone can remember being without her? How do you create ceremonies worthy of a woman who has redefined what monarchy means in the modern age? Victoria's detailed final wishes make everything exponentially more complicated. She wants a full military funeral, highly unusual for a queen in an age when royal women are expected to be buried with feminine delicacy. She absolutely refuses embalming, shocking for someone of her status in a society obsessed with preserving appearances even in death. Most controversially, she demands white ponies to pull her gun carriage, instead of the traditional black horses that have drawn royal coffins for centuries. This seemingly small detail sends protocol officers into panic. Where does one find white ponies trained for funeral processions? How do you explain to the public that their queen has chosen to break with tradition, even in death? Her most personal demand proves most challenging of all. She wants to be buried beside Prince Albert at Frogmore, rather than in the traditional royal vault at St. George's Chapel. This isn't just about location, it's about love triumphing over duty, personal devotion overriding state tradition. Even in death, Victoria chooses Albert over everyone and everything else. The funeral preparations descend into near farce that would scandalize everyone if the circumstances weren't so tragic. Kaiser Wilhelm II, overcome with grief and German efficiency, orders a death mask to be made against Victoria's explicit wishes. This seemingly reasonable request infuriates the British royal family, creating diplomatic tension even as they struggle to plan appropriate ceremonies for their departed matriarch. The Duke of York falls seriously ill from the stress and exhaustion of the situation, adding medical crisis to organizational chaos. Servants rush between sick rooms and planning meetings, trying to care for the living while preparing to honor the dead. Most embarrassingly, the royal undertaker rushes from London in great haste, but somehow forgets to bring the most essential item, a coffin suitable for the Queen Empress of the largest empire in human history. This oversight would be impossible to believe if it weren't documented in official records. A local craftsman on the Isle of Wight must hastily construct a coffin for the woman who ruled over 400 million subjects across 6 continents. When the coffin is finally completed and delivered to Osborne House, Victoria's faithful dresser, Mrs. Tuck, helps prepare the body according to instructions that the Queen left in sealed envelopes, to be opened only after her death. These preparations follow Victoria's precise wishes, while revealing secrets that would shock the public if they ever became known. They dress her in a white silk gown, white for rebirth and hope rather than black for mourning and finality. Her wedding veil, carefully preserved for 40 years, is placed over her face, transforming her in death into the young bride who once stood beside Prince Albert with such joy and optimism. The garter, ribbon and star are positioned with ceremonial precision, symbols of the monarchy she has served with unwavering devotion for more than 6 decades. But Mrs. Tuck and Dr. Reed perform one final, clandestine service that would scandalize Victorian society if the truth were ever revealed. Following Victoria's most private instructions, they place several forbidden items in the coffin that speak to relationships the public never understood or accepted. Most shocking is the wedding ring of John Brown, Victoria's controversial Scottish servant, which they carefully slip onto her finger alongside her own wedding band. They also include a lock of Brown's hair, hidden among the flowers where no one will ever see it. These secret mementos speak to a side of Victoria that history has often tried to ignore or explain away, the lonely woman who found comfort in an unconventional friendship that helped her survive the long, dark years after Albert's death. The funeral procession becomes the largest military display London has seen since the Duke of Wellington's funeral 50 years earlier. Soldiers from every corner of the empire march through streets lined with millions of mourners, English farmers standing beside Indian princes, Canadian merchants next to Australian sheep ranchers, all united in grief for the woman who gave meaning to their shared identity as subjects of the British Crown. The cortege stretches for miles, a river of black uniforms and brass buttons flowing toward Windsor Castle through streets that have never seen such crowds or such silence. Military bands play funeral marches that echo off building walls, creating a musical envelope of mourning that wraps around the entire procession. But even this solemn occasion cannot escape the chaos that has marked every aspect of Victoria's death and funeral preparations. The gun carriage carrying her coffin hits a significant pothole near Hyde Park Corner, and for one heart-stopping moment that seems to last forever, the coffin slides dangerously toward the edge of the carriage. Quick-thinking soldiers leap forward to steady it, their hands grabbing brass handles and silk draping, just in time to prevent a catastrophe that would have traumatized the entire nation. The near disaster passes so quickly that most spectators don't realize how close they came to witnessing a tragedy that would have overshadowed even the Queen's death itself. At St. George's Chapel, confusion continues to reign despite months of planning and preparation. 2 archbishops arrive early and immediately begin conflicting with each other over precedence and procedure. Naval personnel are mysteriously absent from what was supposed to be a military service, leaving gaps in the ceremonial formations that everyone notices but no one can explain. The chapel itself is only half full, despite the fact that this is arguably the most important funeral in British history. Protocol officers, panicked by the empty pews, hastily invite additional attendees to fill the spaces, creating a mixture of planned guests and last-minute additions that would normally be considered completely inappropriate. Finally, Victoria begins her last journey to Frogmore, travelling roads she once walked with Prince Albert during their early years of marriage, when the future seemed unlimited, and their love felt strong enough to conquer any challenge. The mausoleum where Albert has waited for 40 years stands ready to receive his beloved wife, their reunion finally at hand after 4 decades of separation. As her coffin is lowered into the mausoleum beside his, you can almost feel Victoria's spirit settling into peace for the first time since 1861. The woman who spent 40 years in mourning is finally reunited with the man who gave meaning to her life, their love story reaching its conclusion in the quiet dignity of shared eternity. Standing in that mausoleum today, you can see their marble effigies lying side by side. Albert still young and handsome as he was when death took him at 42, Victoria aged and marked by the years of rule and sorrow that followed his passing. But they're together now, their hands nearly touching across the narrow space between their tombs, their love finally triumphant over time, duty, and death itself. Queen Victoria's death marked more than the end of a life or even the end of a reign. It marked the end of an entire way of understanding the world. She had presided over Britain's transformation from a primarily agricultural society to the workshop of the world. Under her rule, the British Empire reached its greatest extent, controlling nearly a quarter of the Earth's land surface and ruling over 400 million people of every race, religion, and culture. But perhaps most remarkably, she had managed to make monarchy seem both majestic and human in an age of rapid democratization and social change. Through her very public joys and sorrows, her political triumphs and personal tragedies, Victoria had given a human face to an institution that might otherwise have seemed remote and irrelevant to ordinary people's lives. As you step back from this scene and return to the present day, remember that Queen Victoria's final hours reveal something profound and timeless about the human condition. Even the most powerful person in the world, someone who commanded armies, ruled continents, and shaped the destiny of nations, faced death with the same mixture of fear and hope, courage and vulnerability that defines us all. In her final moments, surrounded by family, holding the hands of those who loved her, Victoria died not as an empress, but as a woman who had lived fully, loved deeply, and served faithfully, according to her understanding of duty and devotion. The Victorian era died with her in that small bedroom at Osborne House, but the memory of the woman who defined it, with all her strength and fragility, her wisdom and blindness, her greatness and humanity, continues to inspire and instruct us more than a century after her final breath faded into history.